So today we're going to learn about the quadratic formula. Just like when we were solving using factoring, the quadratic formula, it must be equal to 0. So that rule has not changed. That initial step in solving has not changed. However, we're going to see we have this big complex looking formula here. So let me read the intro to this again. Not every quadratic can be solved using factoring. While factoring is a great method to use when we can do it, we do need a way to solve any quadratic. And that way will be the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is as follows. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So please make sure you write this down. This formula is critical. I would like you guys to try and take the time to memorize it. It's really not too bad if you actually try to memorize it. I do want to point out here, everything that is written in or typed up in black in the formula has to be there every single time. Everything that is colorful in my formula is where we're plugging in numbers. So I'm going to give you a moment to write this down. And then I'm also going to show you, as I just said, I'd like you to take the time to memorize it. Just quickly search up some stuff on YouTube. I have not watched them all, but if you search quadratic formula song, you'll see a lot of people have done a lot of different ways to help you memorize the quadratic formula to melodies of different songs. So I'll just quickly Google that for you, show you what's up with that before we move into our examples. So.
This is something I should be writing down, so y'all have your notes. Just let it sit there and not write it down.
I do have extra paper. Unfortunately, I don't have an extra pencil. I'll double check if I don't. Please. I love one extra pencils. Yeah. Oh, he has one. Yeah. Thank you very much. So I get this may look big, it may look intimidating right now, but actually once you see it in motion, I'm not going to say, oh, it's magically going to become easy, but it's not as bad as it looks. So for your work with this, I do expect to see you plugging into here. I don't want to hear something like, oh, I just put it in Desmos and it spit out the answer. Well, if you took the time to type this into Desmos, you can take the time to write it on your paper or type it out on your paper. I do want to also bring up the symbol in the middle here, that plus minus symbol. What happens is when we were solving quadratics using factoring, we usually got two answers, right? So what the quadratic formula says is you're going to do it twice, essentially. You do it once with a plus sign and once with a minus sign to determine where your two solutions are. First example we do, we're actually going to utilize the quadratic formula that I believe I set it up so it can also be solved using factoring. We will show both give us the same answer when you can do both. And that's, let me get that fixed. So. Oh, I just forgot to put the comma in there. That was. Okay, let's look at this in action here. So on each of these slides, I'm writing the quadratic formula nice and big for us. So again, we see it. And honestly, what I'd recommend you do, if you're writing it out on paper, you just write it at the top of your paper for all your problems. If you're typing it out, again, it could be helpful to type the quadratic formula at the top. So here with this, the first thing we're going to do is identify A, B, and C. It's the same A, B, and C we were using before for the snowflake method. So A, there's something in front of x squared, that's 1. B is -9. And C equals 20. So now our goal is to literally just plug these in to the quadratic formula and see what happens. Again, if I wrote something in black, yes. Yep. If I wrote something in black on this formula, that means it has to be there every single time. If it's colorful, that means that's where we're plugging in. So I'm going to start it. X equals negative. And now it says B. Now, even though there is a negative sign on the 9 and there's a negative in front of the B, I include both negative signs. So in parentheses, I'm going to just say -9 plus or minus the square root of. So I'm going to go in parentheses -9. negative 9 squared minus 4 times my A value of 1 times my C value of 20. Now this is all over 2 times 1. Before we get going on putting this into the calculator, they'll give you a second to make sure this is written down and then answer any questions you have on it. Does that make sense how I was able to plug into here? So now what we're going to do is utilize Desmos. And this is going to be real nice here because, again, I don't have to work on individual pieces because in the past we focus on what's underneath the square root, clean that up, and take the square root, all this fancy stuff. Here, Desmos is so nice with how it lets me type. Now I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to type it in how I wrote it. Now, the only thing is I can't write the plus and minus, so we'll have to just do it twice, but that isn't a huge deal. So let's go to our graphing calculator. And I'm just going to type it in here. So the whole thing's a fraction, so I'm just going to start with a big division symbol. So I'm going to put everything on the top. So just how I wrote it, negative parentheses, negative 9. Now, again, I can't do the plus or minus, so I'm going to start with doing the plus answer. Remember to get a square root in Desmos, you can hit the keyboard. And that's located at the bottom underneath a square. Yes. There's the pass. And then parentheses, negative 9, close parentheses squared, minus 4 times my A value of 1 times my C value of 20, all over 2 times 1. And we get one of our answers is 5. That wasn't too horrible typing this in, right? It's gonna, you'll get used to typing in. You'll get faster with typing, I know. But that wasn't too bad to get that all in. I just make sure it looks just like how I wrote it, parentheses and all, and it spits out my answer. Now you may be saying, Mr. Isaacoff, do I have to totally retype that in again? Yes and no. Watch this. Desmos will let me copy this. So if I hit the gear here, see this little like paper symbol here? That means to copy it. So if I hit that, it copies it to the line below. The only thing that changes is I already did the plus. Now I need to do the minus. So this plus sign right here after the negative 9, I am going to delete that, change it to a minus, and there's my other answer. So in doing this, I get 5 and 4. So I'm just going to write it out here. X equals 4, X equals 5. And that's it. If we were to graph this, we would see a quadratic that crosses at 4 and 5. And watch this. I'm very quickly going to do the snowflake on this. So that would be 20, 1, 1, and negative 9. Let's see. 4 times 5 gets me 20 and makes 9, but I want them to both be negative to make it negative 9. So if I did that, that'd be x minus 4 times x minus 5 equals 0. And then if I do my split and solve on the snowflake, x minus 4 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0, add 4, and we get x equals 4, add 5, and again, we get x equals 5. Exact same answers we got with the quadratic formula. I know I went a little fast through solving using factoring there, but it doesn't matter if I solve using factoring or the quadratic formula. However, for today's practice, I want you using the quadratic formula on all of them, even if you see how to factor it, just so you get the practice with it, because I'm telling you right now, on your quiz, you're going to have one problem you have to use the quadratic formula on to solve. Now I have 4 problems for you to solve on the quiz. 3 of them you could utilize factoring, but if you want to use the quadratic formula on them, you're welcome to. Looks like we got this example down. Let's look at example 2, which should go a little bit quicker. So example 2, I'm not going to bother solving using this with factoring, but right away, is this equal to 0? So say equal 0 over here? No, so how do I get rid of the 7? Yeah, we subtract 7. And in doing so, that gives me 3x squared minus 5x minus 7 equals 0. So A is equal to 3 in this case. B is negative 5. And C is negative 7. Please watch your signs here. If I have a negative in front of something, please make sure to include it in there. That is critical. If you miss a sign, you're going to start running into some errors. So let's get plugging in. It's going to be x equals negative. What's my b value? What's my b value here? So negative 5. Plus or minus the square root. Again, we're plugging in that same b value. Please use parentheses around it. Square minus 4. Now, what's my a value? Three, good. And what's my c value? Negative 7. Good, good. So I just multiply those together. All over 2 times, what's my a value here? 3 again, there we go. So again, this was a lot we wrote down here. I do expect to see this written on your work. If you're taking the time to type it into Desmos, it takes another 30 seconds to write it down on your paper, not even, or type it up on Cami. So again, I'm just going to work with this. Now, what I could do here is I could just clear out the numbers on the old one and just change them up. But I'm just going to start a brand new line and start from the beginning. So again, it's a big division here, a big fraction. So I hit divided by. Now I focus on the top. Negative, parentheses, negative 5 plus, whoop, that was a 0, not a parenthesis there. That's going to throw it off. There we go. Plus the square root. This went down slightly too far. Plus the square roots of parentheses, -5, close parentheses, squared minus 4 times 3 times my C value of -7 all over 2 times 3. Whoop. Parentheses 3. So here with this, I get a number. This is not a very nice decimal, is it? This is showing me this is actually a problem I couldn't factor. And let's look at it. If I did 3 times 7, that gives me 21. So my only options for that are 1 and 21, 3 and 7, neither of which can make me a 5. So this one forced us to use the quadratic formula here. So that's one of my answers. And I'll just go get 3 decimal places on it. So 2.573. Now I need to do the negatives. So I'm going to hit the gear here. And again, I want to duplicate or copy. And then I can change the plus here to a minus, so it's a lot less typing. So I get this right here. It's 2 different answers. Now you may be saying like, okay, I see how you got that, but how do we know those are right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly graph the equation. 3x squared, and that's a minus 5x minus 7. And if I click on where those cross, notice if we go, thank you very much, Caleb. If we go 3 decimal places here, we get the exact same thing, 2.573 to -0.907. So again, this tells us where it crosses without actually looking at the visuals of the graph. I'll grab your page in a second. So that gave me x equals -0.907 and x equals to, what was that? 0.573. So very calculator heavy. So it's just going to be about utilizing that. If you wanted to start breaking things down bit by bit, you want to see it done that way, just call me over and I'll show you. Same if you're looking for where the formula comes from. If you really want to see that, we can go over that. But right now, I just want to focus on right before break. Hey, how do we utilize it? Got 2 more examples here. So is this one equal to 0 to start? No, so how do I get rid of the minus 4x? Yeah, add 4x to both sides. Now remember, I always like it to go x squared, x, and then my non-variable number. So here, I'm just going to rewrite it as x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Now you may say that doesn't look too bad, but when I look at 2, if I try and factor this, only thing that multiplies to give me 2 is 1 times 2, but that adds up to 3 or subtracts to 1, and that's not this positive 4 here, so I can't factor it. So my A value is just 1. What's my B value here? 4, good, good. And my C value? just 2. So again, I'm going to start just plugging into the quadratic formula. I do need to see this on your paper each time. So x equals negative, and then it says 4 is my b value, plus or minus 4 squared minus 4 times my a value of 1 times my c value of 2 all over 2 times 1. So now it's a matter again of typing this in to Desmos. So let's take a moment to do that. Not going to worry about that old graph. I will make sure to post the Desmos work as well. And I'm going to just add notes saying what number they were coordinating with. So again, I'm just going to start it. Big fraction bar, negative, parentheses 4, plus, and then I can do square root, parentheses 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. Okay, so here we get negative 0.586. That's one of my answers. I'm going to go to edit. Let's duplicate it and now flip it from being a plus to being a minus, and we get negative 3.414. So again, we got numbers that weren't very nice looking, and that's kind of common with the quadratic formula. Definitely, if we found out we can't factor it, if we can't factor it, we should see these decimal answers like this. Now, there are ways to get the exact answers. We're not going to worry about them in IM2 right now. That will be more time for IM3 when we cover quadratics a little more in depth. So I don't expect to see the exact answers. Just give me 3 decimal places. That is x equals negative 3.414 and x equals negative 0.5, I think it was 87 or 86. There we go. Last example, something very interesting happens, and we'll also look at it visually, seeing what that means. And then we're going to call it a day on the notes. I'm going to give you time to work on it in class today. Now, again, I know these notes will probably leave us with only about 25 minutes left in class. The amount of work I assigned, I know is going to take you longer than 25 to finish. So you'll have time on Thursday to finish up. Okay, so this is definitely not equal to 0 right now, is it? So how am I going to get rid of both of these things here? Add 3x to both sides, and what else? And add 1 to both sides. So that gives me 4x squared plus 3x plus 1. What's my a value here? Good. What's my c value? Oh, I said c. I meant to say b first. I'll write down c is 1. Good. What's my b value? 3. There we go. So now again, I'm just plugging in here. X equals negative, and what should I be plugging in right here? Plugging in 3 plus or minus the square root of, again, plugging in 3 here, so that's going to be 3 squared minus, now 4 is always in here. What's my A value again? Times my C value, which is all over 2 times again that A value of 4. Yep, it's right here. So now we're going to type this in. We're going to see something very interesting happening. And we're going to talk about what's happening in 1 second. But let's see what Desmos tells us first. Because what's interesting, you won't see it until Desmos gives us an answer. So I'm just typing it in just how I wrote it. So square root of, then parentheses 3 squared minus 4 times, it's my A value again, oh yeah, 4 times my C value of 1 all over 2 times 4. Now notice here, Desmos is telling me this is undefined. What's happening here, if I look at what's underneath the square root, I'm just going to quickly copy what's underneath the square root. I get a negative answer. There are ways to take the square root of a negative, but we haven't learned them yet. That's a topic for IM3. You'll learn how to take a square root of a negative in IM3. Right now in IM2, we're just going to stick with, hey, this is undefined. We can't take the square root of a negative, so it is simply undefined. And look, if I change it from a plus to a negative, that's not going to change the fact that it's still spitting out undefined here. Now, here's why this is undefined. Let's take a look at this graph visually. So I had 3x squared, or no, not 3x squared, 4x squared plus 3x plus 1, right? So looking at this graph, when Logan gets back, looking at this graph, what do you notice happens here or doesn't happen? Does this graph ever cross the x-axis? No. And when we're talking about the solution to a quadratic, we're talking about where it crosses the x-axis. And since this completely misses the x-axis, this is undefined. So when I get undefined, here's what I'm going to make as my statement. I am just going to say no real solution. So there is an imaginary number that works there. And again, we're going to talk about imaginary numbers more in IM3. We just don't have the time to cover it in IM2 right now. I could quickly give you a crash course on it, but I'd like to actually give you more knowledge on it than just like, hey, quick, here it is. So that is our notes on quadratics. That's the last thing we are learning about quadratics for this unit. So just be ready for your tests. I'll make sure to get this recording posted later today. Stop recording.